The desert wind, usually a symphony of sand of silence across the pre-FTL human colony world of Silos, carried a new, discordant note that night, a whisper of falling stars and fractured time that prickled Sterling Array's skin long before the crimson gash tore across the obsidian canvas of the sky, visible even through the reinforced plasteel dome of his isolated research outpost. Sterling, a historical archivist more accustomed to the whispers of forgotten data reels than celestial omens, felt an inexplicable dread coil in his gut, a haunting premonition that the archival silence he had curated for years was about to be irrevocably shattered. He was a man burdened by the immense responsibility of preserving the nascent history of this frontier world, a task that had driven him to this hermitage in the heart of the Crystal Desert, far from the nomadic tribes who followed the great, crystal-feeding herds. The crimson streak resolved into a plummeting object, trailing fire and debris, arsing towards the dunes a few clicks east of his position. It was no meteor, its trajectory was too controlled, then too chaotic. His relentless drive, usually channeled into deciphering ancient scripts, now surged towards the unknown. Sterling Array, his lean frame tense, watched the impact flare on his long-range optical sensors. The outpost's seismographs registered a significant tremor. Protocol dictated he report it to the scattered colonial governance, but Silos was pre-FTL, its people still mystified by the true nature of the stars. Such a report would cause panic, attract unwanted attention. His deeper, instinctual sense, the one that had made him a superlative archivist, screamed that this was something else entirely, something alien to Xylos. Burdened by this sudden, cosmic secret, he overrode his own safety protocols. He had to investigate. The sand skimmer, usually reserved for geological surveys, hummed to life beneath his touch, its treads kicking up plumes of ochre dust as he sped towards the crash site, the twin moons casting long, dancing shadows across the rippling landscape. The Crystal Desert was aptly named. Giant, multifaceted crystals, some taller than his outpost, jutted from the sand, pulsing with a faint internal luminescence that sustained the unique local megafauna. The air grew thick with an ozone tang and the smell of superheated metal as he approached. The impact crater was a scar of fused glass and twisted, unrecognizable alloys. And at its center, half buried, lay not wreckage in the conventional sense, but something that looked almost organic, like the shed carapace of some colossal insect, cracked and smoking. Then he saw her. Saskia Celestial, or rather he saw a figure stirring within the wreckage, her form angular and encased in what seemed to be segmented, obsidian-like plating that shimmered faintly even in the low light. It was clearly an exoskeleton, hard and protective, yet moving with an unnatural grace. One arm, also plated, was braced against a shard of the alien craft, while the other clutched her side. As he cautiously approached, skimmer lights cutting through the dust, she turned her head. Her face, framed by short, dark tendrils that seemed to absorb the light, was strikingly humanoid, yet undeniably alien. Her eyes, large and the color of amethysts, fixed on him with an unnerving intensity, a mixture of pain, fear, and something else, a deep, wary vigilance. She was a castaway, that much was clear, a stranger from a realm beyond human comprehension. He saw no visible weaponry, but her entire being radiated a coiled strength. He was a scientist, an archivist. His instinct was to observe, to record, not to confront. But the vulnerability in her posture, despite the formidable natural armor, tugged at a sense of responsibility he couldn't ignore. He cut the skimmer's engine, the sudden silence amplifying the crackle of cooling metal and her ragged breathing. "I mean you no harm," Sterling projected, his voice surprisingly steady. He held his hands up, palms open, a universal gesture he hoped transcended species. Saskia Celestial did not respond verbally. Instead, a low chittering sound emanated from her, her head tilting as if processing an unfamiliar dataset. Her dark, hardened plating, which he would later learn was the biological signature of a void strider, bore scorch marks and a deep fissure along one shoulder pauldron. He noticed then that the very sand around her seemed to subtly shift, not from the wind, but as if responding to her presence. Tiny desert burrowers, usually unseen, emerged briefly, their antennae twitching towards her before retreating. It was a fleeting, almost imperceptible detail, a hint of her unique biology, her ability to subtly influence non-sentient life. Sterling, relentlessly driven by curiosity as much as compassion, took a hesitant step closer. "You're injured?" he stated, more for himself than for her. The air between them thrummed with unspoken questions and the palpable tension of first contact. This was no longer about preserving the past. A future he couldn't imagine had just crash-landed in his desert. The haunting whisper he'd felt earlier now had a face, and the weight of that encounter settled upon him, profound and terrifyingly new. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him despite the desert heat, that the silence of his world was over, and the echoes of this arrival would resonate far beyond the crystal desert. The first consequence of this encounter was the immediate, silent alarm pinging in a distant, shadowed sector of space as a Ky'than scout drone, cloaked and unseen in high orbit, registered the unique energy signature of Saskia's damaged vessel, a signature linked to a long-hunted prize. Sterling cautiously circled the wreckage, his gaze constantly returning to Saskia, and her breathing was shallow, and a faint bioluminescent ichor, the color of dying starlight, seeped from a crack in her side plating. His medical knowledge was limited to human physiology, but pain was a universal language. He unclipped a basic medkit from his belt, its contents suddenly seeming woefully inadequate. "I have supplies. They might help." Saskia watched him, her amethyst eyes unwavering. The chittering sound intensified slightly, then stopped. She made a small gesture with her uninjured hand, a slow deliberate movement towards her wound, then towards him. An invitation, or a warning. Sterling chose to interpret it as the former. His drive to understand, to help, overrode his fear. He knelt, careful to keep a respectful distance. "My name is Sterling Array," he said softly. "I am a keeper of records for this world." Saskia's head tilted again. Then a voice, not from her mouth in the conventional sense, but a melodic, resonant tone that seemed to form directly in his mind, a form of telepathic communication. "Records of this dust ball." The mental voice was tinged with an alien cadence, but the surprise and a touch of something akin to disdain for a sedentary existence were clear. It was the first glimpse into her cultural quirk, the nomadic void strider, for whom planets were mere waypoints, not homes. Sterling, taken aback by the mental intrusion, paused. "It's home to my people. We are young as a starfaring well. We aren't starfaring yet." Saskia's internal data processing organ was clearly working overtime, cross-referencing his neural patterns, his language. "Pre-FTL. Understood. Your vibrations, they are not hostile." She shifted, a pained hiss escaping her lips, the sound more like grinding crystal than anything organic. "Let me see," Sterling urged, inching closer. He could see the intricate structure of her exoskeleton now, like polished, living obsidian, each plate fitting seamlessly into the next. As he reached for the medkit, a faint shimmer distorted the air above the crater rim. Saskia stiffened, her entire posture changing from wounded to dangerously alert. "They are here." Her mental voice was sharp, urgent. "They? Who are they?" Sterling asked, his heart pounding. Before she could answer, a thin beam of crimson light lanced down, striking the sand near his skimmer, vaporizing it into a cloud of incandescent particles. He threw himself flat, the heat scorching his back even through his protective gear. Another beam hit the wreckage, showering them with molten debris. These were not warning shots. This was precise, targeted annihilation. The Ky'than were wasting no time. The initial consequence of their meeting had arrived with deadly force. Saskia, despite her injuries, moved with astonishing speed. She grabbed Sterling's arm with a grip of surprising strength, her plated fingers cool against his skin. "Move. The desert, it will shield us for a time." She didn't run in a straight line but darted between the massive, energy-rich crystals that dotted the landscape, her movements fluid and economical, clearly at home in navigating treacherous terrain. Sterling, an archivist used to quiet archives, found himself scrambling to keep up, his lungs burning, his mind reeling from the sudden shift from rescuer to fugitive. The nomadic adaptability of her species was immediately apparent. His sedentary life had not prepared him for this. They took refuge in a narrow crevice between two colossal, amethyst-hued crystals. The beams continued to probe, slicing through the lesser crystal formations around them, sending shards raining down. Saskia pressed herself against the cool crystal wall, her breathing still labored. She looked at Sterling, her expression unreadable but for the urgency in her eyes. "The Seekers, Ky'than. They hunt my people. They hunt the song." "The song?" Sterling panted, brushing crystal dust from his face. Saskia touched her temple. "A living map, a pathway. To sanctuary, and to something they desire more than life itself." Here it was, the hint of her hidden depth, the living map or star song she carried, Likely within that biological data organ he'd read about in speculative xenobiology texts he never thought he'd verify. The Ky'than, the parasitic species, were after it. And now, by association, they were after him. The immediate consequences of finding Saskia were a fight for survival and a dawning realization that his quiet life was a relic of the past. He was burdened by a new, far more dangerous responsibility, protecting not just a castaway, but potentially the key to something far greater. His relentless drive found a new, terrifying focus. He had to keep her safe. He had to understand. The desert, once his sanctuary of solitude, was now their first battlefield. The nomadic tribes who roamed this desert, following the crystal-feeding herds, were oblivious to the cosmic drama unfolding in their ancestral lands. For now, Sterling and Saskia were utterly alone. The Ky'than probe, a sleek, black dart-like craft, hovered silently above the crystal formations, its sensors sweeping the area. Saskia's hardened plating offered some resistance to passive scans, but they couldn't stay hidden for long. Her injury was clearly taking its toll. The bioluminescent echo now flowed more freely, leaving a trail that, while faint, would be detectable to advanced sensors. Sterling, his archivist mind trying to process the cascade of impossible events, knew they needed a new plan. His outpost was compromised, likely destroyed. His skimmer was gone. They were on foot, in a hostile desert hunted by an unknown alien entity. "We need to move," he said, his voice low. "Away from the crash, confuse their tracking." Saskia nodded, her amethyst eyes scanning their surroundings. The deep desert, the shifting sands and magnetic anomalies will offer better cover. But my essence, it leaks. They will find us. She pushed herself off the wall, a grimace of pain briefly contorting her features. It was then, as the first rays of Silos's primary sun began to paint the crystal peaks with hues of orange and pink, that the turning point, the biological imperative, began to manifest. Saskia stumbled, a sharp cry, not of pain from her wound, but something deeper, more systemic, tearing from her. She clutched her head, her plated fingers digging into her temples. "No, not now, the unison, it begins." Her mental voice was strained, fragmented. "Unison, what's happening?" Sterling rushed to her side, supporting her as her legs buckled. Her exoskeleton, usually a cool obsidian, began to emit a faint internal heat. A subtle, almost imperceptible shimmer of energy, like heat haze, rose from her plating. Biological imperative, my species void striders when under extreme duress or near a compatible resonance. She gasped, her eyes losing focus, then snapping back to him with an almost desperate intensity. Your energy signature, it's compatible." Sterling felt a bizarre thrumming in his own chest, a sympathetic vibration that resonated with the heat radiating from Saskia. It wasn't unpleasant but deeply unsettling. Compatible? What does that mean? He was an archivist, a man of logic and data. This was far outside any known biological parameter. Saskia's breathing grew rapid. The faint shimmer around her intensified, and with it, a powerful psionic wave washed over Sterling. It wasn't an attack, but an irresistible pull, a sense of her consciousness trying to meld with his. His mind was filled with a torrent of alien sensations, the vast emptiness of space, the echoes of her star song, the fear of the Ky'than, and an overwhelming, primal urge for connection, for fusion. The unison, it stabilizes, it amplifies, it seeks a partner too, to share the burden, to survive. Her voice was a desperate plea in his mind. Your proximity, it accelerates it, and mitigates the worst, but it demands integration. This was the unexpected union, raw and terrifying. It was not a gentle mating cycle, it was a psionic attunement, a biological imperative born of crisis, and he, a pre-FTL human, was an accidental catalyst and participant. The Ky'than probe, perhaps sensing the surge of unusual energy, descended lower, its weapon ports glowing. There was no time for questions, no time for denial. Survival demanded cooperation, and now, Saskia's biology demanded an even deeper, more intimate form of it. Her body was racked with tremors. The heat she radiated was becoming intense. Sterling, acting on an instinct he didn't understand, wrapped his arms around her, trying to shield her, to offer what little comfort he could. The contact was electric. As his skin touched her heated plating, the psionic pressure in his mind lessened slightly, replaced by a flood of shared sensations. He felt her pain, her fear, but also her incredible resilience. And beneath it all, a dawning awareness of him, not as an alien but as something else. A focal point. A partner. "Oh, hold me." Her mental voice was a mere whisper, laced with a vulnerability that belayed her warrior-like exterior. The unison, it will bind us for a time, or it will consume me. The stakes were impossibly high. To refuse was to condemn her. To accept was to plunge into an unknown that could irrevocably change him. The Ky'than probe fired again, a beam slicing through the crystal just meters away, showering them with superheated shards. The choice was made for him. "I'm here," he said, his voice hoarse, holding her tighter. "I won't let you fall." As he spoke those words, the psionic energy surged not outwards but inwards, coalescing between them. A brilliant, momentary flash of light, unseen by the Ky'than, enveloped them. When it subsided, Saskia's tremors had eased. The intense heat began to recede. She sagged against him, exhausted but stable. The most acute phase of the unison had passed, but something had irrevocably shifted. A subtle, shimmering cord of energy, visible only to their heightened senses, now linked them, a psionic tether forged in desperation and unexpected compatibility. They were no longer just a human and an alien. They were bound, their fates intertwined. The Ky'than probe, momentarily confused by the energy spike and subsequent dampening, hesitated. This gave them their chance. Saskia, leaning heavily on Sterling but with a new, focused light in her eyes, pointed towards a series of narrow, interconnected ravines. "This way. The bond, it strengthens me. And it hides us better. They will sense us as one anomaly, harder to pinpoint." Forced proximity was now an unbreakable psionic link. Their journey into the crystal desert had just become infinitely more complex and infinitely more personal. The fight for love and new life had begun, not with a gentle touch, but with a biological cataclysm. The days that followed were a crucible, forging their unwilling alliance into something deeper. The psionic bond, the unison, was a constant presence, a subtle hum beneath the surface of their awareness. It brought with it shared sensations, a dull ache in Sterling's shoulder when Saskia overexerted her injured side, a fleeting taste of the strange, metallic tang of her nutrient paste when she consumed it. More profoundly, it brought flashes of understanding, glimpses into each other's minds that transcended spoken language. Sterling learned of the Void Striders, a nomadic species scattered across the void, their culture one of constant adaptation and movement. He felt Saskia's profound sense of displacement, her yearning for the star song to guide her not just to a sanctuary, but to the scattered remnants of her people. He understood her deep-seated strangeness towards his sedentary archivist life, a life she perceived as a cage, however comfortable. Saskia, in turn, experienced Sterling's world through the unison. She felt his relentless drive, not as a mere personality quirk, but as a deep-seated need to protect, to preserve, to make sense of the universe. She felt the weight of his responsibilities, the quiet sorrow of his isolation, and increasingly, his burgeoning, protective feelings towards her. His knowledge of Silos's treacherous environment, gleaned from years of solitary geological surveys, proved invaluable. He led them through labyrinthine canyons where the magnetic fields played havoc with Ky'than sensors, showed her how to find water trapped in the porous hearts of certain geode-like flora, and how to identify the edible, if unappetizing, grubs that burrowed beneath the crystalline sands. His calm, methodical approach, a product of his archivist training, was a counterpoint to her more reactive, instinctual survival skills. One evening, huddled in a shallow cave as a sandstorm howled outside, whipping crystal shards against the rock, the vulnerability between them deepened. Saskia was tending to the fissure in her shoulder pauldron, the bioluminescent echo still weeping slowly. Sterling, watching her, felt a pang of helplessness. His medkit was useless against her alien physiology. "Does it hurt much?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the storm. Saskia paused, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the faint glow of a phosphorescent moss Sterling had identified. "Pain is a familiar companion to a Void Strider. But this wound is slow to seal. My body focuses its energies on maintaining the unison, and on the song." She touched her temple. "The song is agitated. The Ky'than's proximity corrupts its harmony." This was the moment. Sterling, driven by a need to understand the core of their peril, leaned closer. "The star song. You said it's a living map. What does it lead to? And why do the Ky'than want it so badly?" Saskia looked at him, a long, searching gaze. The unison hummed between them, a conduit of trust. "It leads to the last archive of the Eldra, a sanctuary built by a species long vanished. They were weavers of time. Within the archive lies the Chronos Keystone, a device, an artifact, that can gently nudge the currents of time. Not grand alterations, but small, localized ripples. My people were its guardians. The Cathar, a shiver, not of cold, ran through her. They are a parasitic race. They consume not just flesh, but entire cultures, entire histories, absorbing them, twisting them. The Chronos keystone for them is not a tool for gentle nudges. It is a weapon. With it, they believe they can rewrite their own parasitic evolution or erase the resistance of those they wish to consume. The loss of such a cultural keystone, as they see it, would break any species, demoralize them utterly. Sterling felt a cold dread. A device that could manipulate time even in a limited way. This was the core plot element, the true stakes. His archivist mind, trained to revere history, recoiled at the thought of it being weaponized, rewritten. And your star song, it's the only way to find this keystone. The song is more than a map. It is the resonance key to the archive itself. Without it, the archive remains hidden, phased, untouchable. I am one of the few left who carry a complete song. Her burden was immense, far greater than his own perceived responsibilities. His relentless drive now had an almost galactic scope. They had to protect the song, protect Saskia, and keep the keystone from the Ky'than. Their forced cooperation blossomed into a fragile trust. Saskia, initially wary and self-reliant to a fault, began to depend on Sterling's knowledge of the local terrain and his steady presence. She, in turn, saved him more than once, her enhanced senses detecting Ky'than patrols long before he could, her ability to influence the desert creatures creating diversions. On one occasion, cornered in a narrow pass, she let out a series of complex, resonant clicks and whistles. From the surrounding rocks, a swarm of large, armored desert scorpions, creatures usually hostile to anything that moved, emerged and advanced not on them, but on the Ky'than hunting party, creating chaos and allowing Sterling and Saskia to slip away. Sterling watched in awe. The living map carrier, also a commander of the wild. Her unique biology was a constant source of wonder, and sometimes trepidation. The cultural differences remained, but became points of curiosity rather than conflict. Saskia found his need to categorize and record everything, even in their desperate flight, baffling. Why trap the now in static symbols? Sterling array. The universe flows. We flow with it. He, in turn, struggled to comprehend her species' apparent lack of permanent settlements, their entire civilization carried within their ships and their minds. But where are your roots? Your history, if not anchored, he'd asked. Our history is in the star song, she'd replied, her mental voice soft. And our roots are in each other, in the connections we forge across the void. Romantic tension, an unexpected seedling in the harsh desert of their predicament, began to sprout. It was in the shared glances that lingered a moment too long, the accidental brush of his hand against her cool, smooth plating as he helped her navigate a treacherous ledge, the way the unison would sometimes flare with a warmth that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with a growing awareness of the other. As more than just an ally. His burden of responsibility now included a fierce, protective ache for this alien woman who carried the fate of worlds within her. Her nomadic heart, accustomed to fleeting connections, found itself strangely tethered to this driven, serious human who looked at her not as a curiosity, but as a person. The developing trust was not just about survival, it was about the slow, cautious unveiling of two souls, worlds apart, finding common ground in the face of annihilation. The crystal desert, initially a symbol of Sterling's isolation, was becoming the unlikely cradle of an interspecies bond, a bond that felt increasingly like the precursor to love. The Ky'than pursuit intensified. They were no longer relying on sporadic probes, but had deployed ground troops, tall, chitinous figures with multiple limbs, their movements unnervingly insectoid, their weapons spitting bolts of corrosive energy. The parasites were closing in, their determination to retrieve the Chronos keystone, or rather Saskia, who was the key to it, growing with every passing hour. Sterling and Saskia were forced into increasingly desperate maneuvers, the vastness of the crystal desert shrinking around them. The limited nature of the keystone, its ability to only gently nudge time, became clearer through Saskia's fragmented explanations, drawn from the star song's ancient lore. It couldn't reverse major events or grant God-like power, but in precise, localized applications, it could shift an outcome, create an opportunity, or reveal a hidden path. This subtlety made it all the more insidious in the Ky'than's potential grasp. One moonless night, they found temporary shelter in the ruins of an ancient, pre-colonial sealand structure, its purpose lost to time, swallowed by the desert. They were exhausted, rations low, the unison a thrumming ache that bound them in shared weariness. The Ky'than were searching a nearby canyon system. They had a few hours at most. Saskia was unusually quiet, her gaze fixed on the star-dusted sky, visible through a crack in the dilapidated roof. Sterling watched her, the stark beauty of her alien features softened by the starlight. The hardened plating of her exoskeleton seemed less like armor and more like a fragile shell protecting an immense inner strength. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly, the intimacy of the question surprising even himself. Saskia turned her amethyst eyes to him. The psionic bond flared, carrying not words, but a wave of profound sadness, longing, and a burgeoning emotion that mirrored the one growing in Sterling's own heart. "I think of the void. Of the silence between stars, which is not empty, but full of potential. And I think of how strange it is to feel anchored, here, with you." Her cultural aversion to sedentary existence was being challenged by the gravity of their shared experience, by the anchor of their bond. He reached out, his fingers tracing the intricate pattern on her forearm plating. It was cool to the touch, yet he felt a warmth emanating from within, from her. "I never imagined," he began, then trailed off unsure how to voice the magnitude of what was happening between them. "My life was ordered. Predictable. You crashed into it, and now it is chaos." Her mental voice held a hint of teasing, a lightness he hadn't heard before. "No," Sterling said, meeting her gaze. "Now it has meaning. Beyond my archives, beyond Xylos. You've shown me a universe I only dreamed of, and dangers I never conceived." He paused, then, his relentlessly driven nature pushing past his ingrained reserve, "and feelings I didn't think I was capable of." The air crackled with unspoken confessions. Saskia's hand, her plated fingers surprisingly gentle, covered his. The unison pulsed a warm, intoxicating wave that washed away the fear, the exhaustion, leaving only a profound sense of connection. The unison, it was meant for survival, Sterling array. A biological imperative. But what grows between us, it is more. I feel it too. This was it. The acknowledgement. The choice based on their connection. The Ky'than could be miles away or moments from discovering them. But in this crumbling ruin, under a canopy of alien stars, they found a sanctuary of their own making. Saskia leaned closer, her alien features just inches from his. The unique biology of the Void Strider, the psionic link, made this moment transcend a mere physical kiss. As her lips, softer than he imagined, met his, it was not just a meeting of flesh, but of minds of souls. The unison surged, a torrent of shared emotions, memories, hopes, and fears. He tasted the stardust of her journeys, felt the deep thrum of her star song, understood her nomadic heart's hesitant desire to pause, to linger. She, in turn, felt the depths of his loneliness, the strength of his newfound purpose, the surprising passion beneath his scholarly exterior. It was a kiss that sealed their bond, not as a biological necessity, but as a conscious choice, a defiant act of love in the face of impending doom. When they finally drew apart, breathless, the universe seemed to have tilted on its axis. The stakes were higher now, not just for the keystone, but for each other, for this fragile, impossible love. "The Ky'than will not stop," Saskia whispered, her voice, even in his mind, filled with a new resolve. "They seek to consume all that is unique, all that is beautiful. We cannot let them have the keystone. We cannot let them have our future." Sterling nodded, his own determination hardening. His burden of responsibility had transformed. It was no longer a weight, but a shield, a weapon. "Then we stop running," he said, his voice firm. "We take the fight to them. The star song, it leads to the last archive and the keystone. Is there anything in its knowledge, anything about the archive itself, that we can use against them?" Saskia's eyes lit with a sudden, fierce gleam. The archive is not just a repository of knowledge. It is a place of temporal instability. The Eldra built it near a natural temporal rift. A place where echoes of the past and glimpses of the future sometimes manifest. The keystone can stabilize these ripples, or, if misused, amplify them catastrophically, a temporal rift. The climax setting, a place of immense power and danger. Sterling's mind, honed by years of piecing together fragmented histories, began to race. If the Ky'than try to seize the keystone there, he mused, at a place where time itself is unstable, it could be their undoing. The plan was forming, desperate and audacious. They wouldn't just protect the keystone, though they would lure the Ky'than to the rift and use the environment, perhaps even the limited capabilities of the keystone itself, against them. Their romantic connection had solidified into a partnership, their love a catalyst for a courage neither knew they possessed alone. The fight for love and new life was about to enter its most perilous stage. The journey to the theorized location of the last archive and the temporal rift was a desperate race against time and the relentless Ky'than. Saskia's star song, now a vibrant, urgent melody in their shared consciousness via the unison, guided them through treacherous mountain ranges and across plains of shimmering, obsidian glass. Sterling's knowledge of Silos's geology helped them find hidden geothermal vents for warmth during the frigid nights and anticipate sudden seismic shifts common in these volatile regions. The Ky'than, led by a particularly cunning and brutal commander, whose psionic signature Saskia described as a cold, devouring void, were always just a step behind, their patrols growing bolder, their tactics more aggressive. They seemed to sense that their prey was no longer just fleeing, but heading towards a specific, significant location. During a brief respite in a petrified forest, its ancient trees turned a colorful agate. Sterling examined the small, crystalline device Saskia had managed to salvage from her ship's wreckage before its final destruction by the Ky'than probe. It wasn't the Chronos keystone itself, but a harmonic resonator, a tool her people used to interact with complex temporal fields and, crucially, to attune to the keystone from a distance. This will not control time like the keystone, Saskia explained, her plated fingers gently turning the multifaceted crystal in her palm. It pulsed with a soft, internal light. But near the rift, it might allow us to perceive the temporal echoes more clearly, perhaps even create small, defensive chronal shields or displacements. Its power is limited, dependent on the ambient temporal energy. This was their core driving element, their slim advantage. Sterling, the archivist, felt a thrill of anticipation mixed with dread. He was about to encounter history not as a record, but as a living, fluctuating force. They made a strategic decision to leave a false trail, leading a significant portion of the Ky'than forces on a wild chase into a region known for its intense magnetic storms and dangerous predators. This involved Saskia using her ability to command a massive herd of horned, six-legged grazers, the crystal-feeding creatures, the nomads, followed to stampede in a specific direction, their tracks and energy signatures masking their own. It was a risky maneuver, but it bought them precious time. As they pressed on towards the coordinates whispered by the star song, the landscape grew increasingly strange. The air itself seemed to shimmer, and ghostly images flickered at the periphery of their vision, fleeting glimpses of Xylos's deep past, of primeval creatures and volcanic eruptions, and sometimes unsettling flashes of what might be possible futures. The temporal rift was close. Sterling found himself changing. The burdened, solitary archivist was shedding his skin. His relentless drive was now laser-focused on Saskia's safety and their mission. He moved with a newfound confidence, his decisions quick and decisive. The Ky'than were not just an enemy, they were an affront to everything he valued: knowledge, history, life itself. Saskia, too, was evolving. The unison, initially a survival mechanism, had blossomed into a profound partnership. She found herself relying on Sterling's intellect and steady courage, finding comfort in his presence that went beyond the biological imperative. Her nomadic instincts, while still strong, were now tempered by a fierce desire to protect not just the star song, but the future she was beginning to imagine with this human. She taught him simple void strider meditation techniques to manage the psionic stress of the unison and the rift's growing influence, and he, in turn, shared stories of human history, of resilience and hope, that resonated deeply with her own people's struggles. Their preparation was less about weapons, they had few beyond Saskia's natural defenses, and the salvage resonator, and more about understanding their environment and their enemy. Saskia knew the Ky'than tactics: overwhelm, consume, demoralize. The commander Vorlag, he will expect us to defend the archive's entrance. He seeks the keystone to amplify his species-consuming power, to make their parasitic cycle absolute and irreversible. More information about the antagonist solidified their resolve. The cultural keystone wasn't just an artifact for the Ky'than, it was the ultimate tool for their horrifying life cycle. Then we don't defend the entrance, Sterling strategized, his eyes scanning the shimmering horizon where the rift was reputedly located. We draw them into the heart of the instability. We use the echoes, the temporal distortions against them. Your resonator will be key. As they crested the final ridge, the sight before them stole their breath. It wasn't a physical structure but a vast, swirling vortex of fractured light and shadow. A wound in the fabric of reality. The air thrummed with an almost unbearable pressure, and the ghostly echoes were no longer fleeting but constant. Overlapping images of battles fought by species Sterling couldn't name, of starships flickering in and out of existence, of future Ky'than war machines clashing with unseen defenders. This was the temporal rift, the climax setting, and at its very heart, barely visible through the maelstrom, was a faint, steady pulse of light, the last archive, phased and protected, awaiting the resonance of the star song and the touch of the Chronos keystone. The Ky'than, their main force now alerted to the true location, were converging. The final confrontation was upon them. Sterling grasped Saskia's hand, her plated fingers closing around his. The unison flared, a beacon of shared purpose in the face of cosmic chaos. Their love, forged in crisis, would now be tested in the crucible of time itself. The Ky'than, led by the imposing commander Vorlag, whose chitinous armor was darker and more ornate than his soldiers, descended upon the temporal rift like a swarm of monstrous locusts. Vorlag, his multifaceted eyes burning with avaricious light, ignored the chaotic temporal energies, his focus solely on Saskia. He could sense the star song, the key to his species' ultimate power. "The Void Strider is mine! Retrieve her and the keystone she protects!" His harsh, grating voice echoed across the distorted landscape, amplified by his helmet's comm system. His warriors, a legion of insectoid horrors, surged forward, their energy weapons tearing through the shimmering air. Sterling and Saskia stood their ground at the edge of the most unstable zone of the rift. "Now, Sterling, array." Saskia's mental command was sharp. Sterling activated the harmonic resonator. The crystal pulsed, emitting a low thrum that resonated with the rift's chaotic energies. The ghostly echoes intensified around them, no longer random but coalescing, and phantasmal legion of ancient silent warriors, spectral figures with glowing spears, flickered into existence, charging the Ky'than vanguard. They were intangible, echoes of a long-past battle, but their appearance caused momentary confusion and chaos among the Ky'than ranks, buying precious seconds. Saskia, her own exoskeleton shimmering with contained power, unleashed a focused pionic blast, amplified by the unison and the rift's energies. It struck a Ky'than heavy weapons platform, overloading its systems and causing it to explode spectacularly. Her Void Strider combat skills, honed over countless skirmishes, were formidable. She moved like a whirlwind of obsidian and amethyst light, her hardened plating deflecting glancing shots, her strikes precise and debilitating. Sterling, though no warrior, used his intellect and the resonator to their fullest. His relentless drive manifested as a desperate ingenuity. He focused the resonator, not to attack, but to manipulate the localized temporal flow. As a Ky'than warrior lunged at him, Sterling created a micro-loop, trapping the creature in a repeating 2-second cycle of its own attack, rendering it helpless. He then targeted a collapsing rock formation above another group, subtly accelerating its fall with a nudge from the resonator, crushing them under tons of stone. He was an archivist, yes, but he was also relentlessly driven to protect what mattered, and Saskia mattered more than anything. Their combined abilities were a symphony of controlled chaos. Saskia's raw power and combat prowess, augmented by her ability to command the lesser, residual life forms that skittered amidst the rift's energies, temporal mites, and phase spiders created openings. Sterling's strategic use of the resonator, and his understanding of the rift's hazardous patterns exploited those openings, turning the Ky'than's numbers against them. Commander Vorlag, enraged, pushed through his faltering troops. He was a terrifying figure, his personal shield deflecting Saskia's psionic attacks, his own weapon, a cruel-looking energy scythe, crackling with dark power. "The keystone will be ours, Void Strider. Your pathetic resistance is an echo of your species' demise." He lunged at Saskia. But Sterling was ready. He had noticed a peculiar temporal anomaly near Vorlag, a fleeting image of a future Ky'than vessel, critically damaged, its core about to breach. It was a risk, a massive one, but their only chance against Vorlag's power. "Saskia! Lure him to the Phantom ship," he yelled, his voice strained from the effort of maintaining the resonator's delicate balance. Saskia understood instantly. She feigned retreat, drawing Vorlag deeper into the rift, towards the shimmering, unstable apparition of the future warship. The unison allowed them to coordinate with unspoken precision. As Vorlag raised his scythe for a killing blow, Saskia dodged, and Sterling, pouring all his concentration into the resonator, focused its energy on the phantom ship's failing core. He didn't try to make it real, but to amplify its temporal echo, its catastrophic end. For a horrifying moment, the phantom warship's core flared with the light of a dying sun, its detonation sequence echoing through the rift. The temporal shockwave, though not physically destructive in their present, was devastating to Vorlag's Ky'than physiology, which was acutely sensitive to chronoton particles. The commander screamed, his shields flickering and dying as the concentrated blast of temporal energy washed over him. His armor cracked, dark ichor seeping out. He stumbled, disoriented, his connection to his troops severed. Saskia seized the opening. With a powerful cry that was both a warrior's challenge and a lament for all the Ky'than had consumed, she channeled the full force of the star song through the unison, not as a map, but as a weapon of pure, focused sonic and psionic energy. It struck Vorlag squarely, the harmonious frequencies anathema to his parasitic nature. The Ky'than commander convulsed, his form flickering, then with a final, choked shriek, he dissolved into a cloud of black dust and fading temporal echoes. With their leader gone and the rift's energies turning against them, the remaining Ky'than forces broke, scattering in terror, only to be consumed by the very temporal instabilities they had ignored. The peak of the external conflict and their partnership had been reached. They had faced the abyss, and together had thrown their enemies into it. The temporal rift began to stabilize slightly, the chaotic energies subsiding, leaving behind a shimmering silence and the faint, steady pulse of the last archive, now unobscured. Exhaustion, profound and bone-deep, settled over Sterling and Saskia. The harmonic resonator in Sterling's hand grew cold, its power spent. Saskia's bioluminescent glow was faint, her exoskeleton marred by numerous energy burns and stress fractures. She swayed, and Sterling, despite his own wariness, caught her, holding her close. The unison, which had been a raging torrent during the battle, softened to a gentle, comforting pulse. They had won. The Ky'than were routed, their threat to the Chronos Keystone neutralized, at least for now. The immediate aftermath was one of stark, echoing silence in the once chaotic rift. The phantom images of past and future battles faded, leaving only the shimmering, otherworldly landscape and the distant, beckoning light of the archive. Saskia leaned heavily against Sterling, her breath ghosting against his neck. "We did it, Sterling Array." The song it is calm now. He held her tighter, relief so potent it was a physical ache. "We did it, Saskia Celestial," he whispered, his voice hoarse. He carefully checked her injuries. The burns were superficial, her natural armor having absorbed the worst, but the stress fractures on her plating would need time and her body's regenerative abilities to heal. He himself was bruised, battered, and utterly drained, but a fierce joy burned through the fatigue. They had not only survived, but had protected something of immense importance. Their relationship, forged in the crucible of shared danger and improbable love, was now irrevocably confirmed. This victory was not just his or hers, it was theirs, a testament to their unexpected union. Looking towards the pulsating light of the last archive, Sterling knew their personal choice to stand together had broader implications. They had defended not just an artifact, but the principle that history, that life, should not be consumed or rewritten by parasitic greed. Saskia gently disengaged, though her hand found his, her plated fingers intertwining with his. "The archive it calls. The keystone must be secured, its song of time shielded from those who would misuse it." Together, they walked towards the source of the light. The entrance to the last archive was not a door, but a shimmering portal that rippled like water. As Saskia, the carrier of the star song, approached, it solidified, opening into a vast, crystalline chamber filled with soft, ambient light and the quiet hum of ancient, impossibly advanced technology. At its center, resting on a simple pedestal, was the Chronos Keystone. It was smaller than Sterling had imagined, a perfectly cut, multifaceted gem that seemed to contain all the colors of the universe, pulsing with a gentle rhythmic light, a soft song of time itself. Saskia approached it, her steps reverent. She reached out, and as her fingers brushed its surface, a wave of peaceful energy washed through the chamber, through the unison, calming the last vestiges of temporal turbulence. "It is safe now," she murmured, her mental voice filled with a quiet triumph. "The Eldra's wards are reestablished. The Ky'than will not find it again easily." Sterling stood beside her, awed by the ancient power and beauty of the place. The responsibility that had burdened him now felt lighter, transformed into a shared purpose. Their fight had been for love, for new life, and for the sanctity of existence itself. In the quiet aftermath, their bond was the strongest force in the chamber, more potent than any temporal energy. The crisis was resolved, but their journey, he suspected, was far from over. Their story, however, had found its pivotal chapter. A year passed on Xylos. The crystal desert slowly reclaimed the scars of their battle at the temporal rift. Sterling Array and Saskia Celestial did not return to the nomadic tribes or the nascent colonial outposts. Instead, they found a secluded valley, verdant and untouched, fed by underground springs, a place where the energy crystals grew small and jeweled, their light soft and nurturing. Here, they began to build a new life, far from the archives of humanity and the star lanes of the Void Striders. Saskia, true to her nomadic roots, initially found the stillness challenging, but the unwavering constancy of Sterling's love and the deep peace of their hidden sanctuary began to soothe her restless spirit. The unison remained, a gentle, permanent link that deepened their understanding and affection daily. If she learned to find the universe in the smallest details of their valley, just as Sterling learned to see the grand sweep of the cosmos in her eyes. They did not entirely retire from the universe's concerns. Using salvage Ky'than communication technology, modified by Sterling's ingenuity and Saskia's innate understanding of advanced systems, they sent out a carefully coded message containing the essence of the star song, not the path to the keystone, but a warning and a beacon of hope to other scattered Void Strider cells and to any species that might be threatened by the Ky'than. Their tale, anonymized but potent, began to spread through the hidden networks of the galactic, fringe the story of the human archivist and the Void Strider who faced down the consumers of worlds at a nexus of time, fighting not for conquest, but for preservation and for each other. It became a cornerstone legend, a whisper that inspired new alliances between disparate species, a testament to the power of unexpected unions. Diplomats on fledgling interspecies councils would later cite the apocryphal tale of the Riftwalkers as an example of how understanding and love could bridge even the widest chasms. Saskia's hardened plating, once solely for protection, now often shimmered with soft, warm light when Sterling was near. Her internal data organ, which once held only the solitary star song, now also held the memories of their shared life, a tapestry woven with human tenacity and Void Strider grace. She had shown Sterling how to truly live beyond the confines of records, and he had shown her the profound beauty of a single, cherished place, a shared home. One evening, as the twin moons of Xylos cast silver light over their valley, they sat hand in hand, watching the crystal-fed flora glow softly. Saskia leaned her head against Sterling's shoulder. The song of our life here, her mental voice was warm, content, is perhaps the most beautiful I have ever known, Sterling Array. He smiled, his heart full. His relentless drive had found its truest focus, his burden of responsibility transformed into the joyous weight of a shared future. Their love, born across the stars amidst conflict, had not only ensured their survival, but had planted a seed of hope that would ripple outwards, inspiring generations of heroes and diplomats to fight for their own love and their own new life amongst the vast, wondrous, and often perilous expanse of the galaxy. Their legend was just beginning to be written in the stars they now watched together, two souls from different worlds, united as one.